I never thought a simple spring trip would end with my son pointing across River Street and whispering, "Mom, that's Dad with another woman." I stopped mid-step. My legs turned to sand. The breeze off the Savannah River turned cold against my skin, though the sun had been warm just a second ago. I looked where Marcus pointed. The man stood by the brick entry of a boutique, laughing with a woman who couldn't have been older than 35. She looped her arm through his, and he leaned in close, intimate, easy. I couldn't breathe. That walk, that tilt of his head, even the stubborn patch of silver curling near his ear. It was Harold, my husband, my dead husband, the man I buried 7 years ago, the man whose ashes I scattered in Blue Ridge with Pastor Hines and our closest church friends, the man whose death certificate I had framed alongside his photo in my den, because some part of me thought I'd need the proof one day. He didn't see me. Or maybe he did. Maybe that's why he ducked inside the store so quick, tugging the girl with him. I felt Marcus, hand on my elbow. "You okay, Ma?" he asked, voice low, careful. I couldn't answer. I pulled out my phone, hands trembling, and snapped a photo. Grainy, yes, but unmistakable. The slouch of his shoulders. The tan loafers I bought him for his 55th. The same hands that used to hold my waist while we slow danced in the kitchen after dinner. I zoomed in. I already knew it in my bones, but I needed the camera to say it too. "That's him," I said finally, voice hoarse. "That's your father." Marcus was quiet, jaw tight. "Then we're not leaving Savannah just yet." It was 11:13 a.m., April 2nd. And somewhere behind the brick facades of Factor's Walk, a man who was supposed to be ash and memory had just stepped back into my life, whole, walking, and wrapped around another woman. That night, back at the rental on Broughton Street, I sat at the edge of the bed, still dressed, staring out the tall window while the city whispered outside. Street lights smeared gold over the brick walls across the alley, and I watched the shadows of strangers pass like ghosts. Marcus had fallen asleep on the couch in the next room, but I knew I wouldn't sleep. Not after what I saw. The envelope was in my travel bag. I hadn't touched it in years, but I brought it on instinct. Harold's death certificate. Official, sealed, dated November 12, 2017. Cause, cardiac arrest. Issued by Fulton County. I ran my thumb over the embossed stamp. The finality of it used to soothe me. Now it made my stomach churn. 7 years a widow. 7 years of learning to sleep on one side of the bed. 7 years of driving myself to doctor's appointments and peeling off my own winter driveway. 7 years of trying to believe there was peace in absence. And yet today, he walked, laughed, touched another woman like he hadn't spent 30 years married to me. Like Marcus wasn't his only son. Like he hadn't let me bury him and grieve him and carry him in my bones. I rose and opened the small safe bag I'd packed with our travel papers. I pulled out the State Sure Life policy, $310,000 paid out to me on December 1st, 2017. I still remembered the phone call confirming it. The numbness in my limbs when the check arrived. 60% to me, 40% to Marcus. It was supposed to be closure. The Unity Baptist Grief Group back in Atlanta had tried to teach us about acceptance. I sat in that church basement every Tuesday for 2 years. I brought casseroles. I brought tissues. I watched women break and rebuild in those folding chairs. And I did it too. I thought I had. Now I understood. You can grieve a man who's dead. You can't grieve a man who gets up and walks into a boutique with another woman like he never loved you. I closed the window, locked it. Tomorrow, we'd start asking questions. But tonight, I laid on top of the covers, held the death certificate against my chest like a Bible, and felt the heat of betrayal rise like a fever. 6 months before Savannah, my life was quiet and ordinary, exactly how I liked it. I lived in a modest brick house on Glenview Avenue in Decatur. 3 bedrooms, 1 story. Blue shutters I repainted myself after Harold died. My routines were carved deep. Up at 6:30, coffee by the back window, morning news humming low. Mondays and Thursdays were for quilting at the community center. Sundays were for Unity Baptist. where Pastor Hines still asked after my arthritis and called me Sister Craig like it was a title of honor. My house was clean, my pantry full, my bills paid like clockwork. I managed everything down to the pennies, because I had to. After Harold passed, I made it my mission not to be a burden to Marcus or anyone else. The pension came in regular, $1,480 a month from Harold's work with the city. My utilities ran about $210, sometimes less in the spring. The HOA sent out those monthly newsletters, always printed on canary paper, reminding us not to leave trash cans at the curb past 9 a.m. and that exterior paint had to be, quote, earth-toned and modest. I never missed a due date. I filed them all in a folder labeled Home 2024, right there in my oak filing cabinet beside my birth certificate, the deed, and Harold's will. Charlene Lewis, my neighbor 2 doors down, was my walking buddy. We'd loop the block twice most mornings, talking about everything and nothing. She liked to gossip. I liked to listen. She also liked to say, "You've got a peaceful spirit, Renetta. That's rare these days." She didn't know I spent whole evenings talking to Harold's picture on the mantel, or that I still bought his brand of toothpaste out of habit, or that I hadn't moved his coat from the closet. Still, life was good. Manageable. Mine. So when Marcus suggested we take a trip, to shake things loose, to see the world again, I said yes. I thought maybe it was time to loosen the seams a bit, breathe some salt air, maybe get a little sun on these knees. I never expected to be gut-punched by a ghost in a linen blazer on River Street. Back then, the idea of Harold still being alive? It would have been laughable, an absurd grief fantasy. But Savannah changed all that. It ripped a seam I didn't even know was fragile. And once a seam tears, you can't pretend it was never there. I hadn't thought about Jerome in years. Not since Harold's funeral, the day the ground beneath my life shifted and never fully settled. It was November 2017, rainy and gray. The kind of wet cold that makes everything ache. I remember the smell of lemon oil from the pews at Haven Rest Funeral Home, and the way the light hit the stained glass just above Harold's photo. It should have been a time to remember, but it never felt right. Too rushed, too controlled. Jerome handled all the arrangements, claimed Harold had wanted it that way. "Quick and clean," he'd said, barely looking me in the eye. The casket stayed closed. I asked once, just once, if I could see Harold one last time. Jerome shook his head with such finality I didn't push. "You don't want to remember him like that," he said. "Trust me." Harold's urn was silver and plain. I have a photo of it tucked inside a drawer in my dresser, taken the day Pastor Hines came by to offer prayer. That urn cost $1,950. I remember because I wrote the check myself when Jerome said the family budget had been stretched thin. He never said whose family. The service was short, neat. No eulogies outside of Pastor Hines, words, no music Harold would have liked, no Sam Cooke, no old gospel, just some pre-recorded organ and canned condolences. Jerome left right after the closing prayer, didn't even stay for the repast, said he had a flight. I haven't heard his voice since. Back then, I told myself it was grief, that we all mourn different, that maybe he and Harold had unresolved tension. Those two never saw eye to eye. But now, in the hazy light of what I saw in Savannah, all of it feels different, strategic, like I was kept out of something. Harold's ashes were scattered, Jerome said, though where, I never knew. Said Harold wanted no marker, no stone, just return to the earth. I swallowed it, like a dutiful wife, like a woman who'd been taught not to cause waves. But now I wonder, was there ever anything in that urn? The thought wrapped around my spine like ice. And suddenly, that silver container in the photo drawer felt like a riddle, a $1,950 lie. The night after we saw him, Harold, or whoever that man was, I pulled out my old files. I sat cross-legged on the rug in my office, a quilt over my shoulders, and spread 6 years of caregiving across the floor like puzzle pieces, bank statements, CVS receipts. Appointment cards. My handwriting in the margins of calendars. Every document was a bruise I had learned to carry. Harold got sick fast in 2017. Weight loss. Fatigue. He stopped eating red meat, said it gave him headaches. By spring, he was sleeping till noon. I made every appointment. Dr. Nelms, his primary, kept calling it stress. Maybe early signs of burnout, he said. But Harold never told me what he was burning out from. By July, he started staying at Jerome's more. He needs quiet, Jerome said. Space. I didn't like it, but I wasn't going to argue with Harold's needs. I told myself, this is love. You care how he wants to be cared for. I still kept up with the meds. 8 prescriptions in all. Pain relief. Blood pressure. Something I didn't recognize. Labeled trial compound. Picked up from a private pharmacy in Roswell. I asked once. He said it was for his nerves. I nodded and paid $85 that week. I always paid. I tracked it all. CVS, Kroger, even that little compounding place that only took checks. In total, $12,627. Out of pocket. Not reimbursed, not questioned. Just spent. The hospice nurse only came twice. Then Jerome said Harold didn't want strangers in the house. Dignity, he called it. I started driving him to Jerome's place in Tucker, dropping him off for days at a time. He wouldn't let me stay. Said I hovered too much. Still, I made his food, prepped his pillboxes, refilled his prescriptions. I was his wife, even when he seemed to forget I existed. I found my old 2017 calendar, floral cover, edges curled from use. October 29th, call Nelms skin rash. November 6th, pick up Insure. November 10th, Harold, Jerome's, overnight. That was the last time I saw him conscious. November 12th, 5:28 a.m., the call. Jerome's voice, flat as linoleum. He's gone, Renetta. But where had he gone? And how? I stared at that calendar until the numbers blurred. Then I reached for my laptop. I wasn't ready to admit what I suspected, but I needed to see. Something. Anything. Because now, those tidy months of caregiving felt like staging. A long, expensive, orchestrated goodbye for a man who might never have left. The laptop was old, slow to boot. I hadn't used it since before the pandemic. Dust clung to the keys like it was protecting secrets. I powered it on, pulled up my archived emails, and started scrolling, mostly junk, old grocery coupons, Unity Baptist bulletins. Then one message stopped me cold. Subject, auto payment confirmation. Sender, Harold Craig 1970 at protonmail.com. Date, November 15, 2017, 3 days after he died. I stared at it, blinking, then clicked. Inside, a receipt for a subscription renewal, some kind of home repair monitoring service. The kind Harold always signed up for, just in case. The body of the email was routine, impersonal, but at the bottom was a note, keep the water line clean, paid through March. I read it again, and again. My scalp went cold, that email address. He hadn't used it in years. In fact, I'd forgotten it existed. But I remembered when he first set it up. He told me Proton Mail was for private stuff. I never asked what that meant. We were married. I thought married meant trusted. I called Marcus. He was still awake, scrolling on his tablet in the rental's living room. He came in barefoot, eyebrows raised. You remember Dad's old email? I asked. He nodded slowly. From before he got sick? Yeah. I turned the screen toward him. This was sent after he died. His face changed. First confusion, then dread. Could be spoofed, he said, reaching for his own laptop. But even as he said it, I saw the gears turning. He pulled up a metadata reader, uploaded the email. We watched in silence as the data came back. Date created. November 15th, 2017 IP location. Tallahassee, Florida device. MacBook Pro, Safari browser. I don't own a MacBook. Never have. And Tallahassee? Harold had never once mentioned the city. We had no family there. No friends. Nothing. It's him, Marcus said quietly. It's gotta be. He sent this. I nodded, numb. The email meant more than just activity. It meant Harold had access to a bank account, to a routine, to life. And if that email was real, then the death certificate in my drawer was the real lie. I backed up the message, took a screenshot, and emailed it to myself twice. Then I printed a hard copy. I slid the printout into a plastic sleeve, placed it gently in my folder behind the death certificate, and labeled it Harold, Postmortem Evidence. For 7 years I thought I had buried a man. Now I had to find the one who got up and walked away. The bank smelled like floor wax and printer toner. That sterile scent you only notice when your heart's pounding too hard. I clutched a folder against my chest, death certificate, email screenshot, and a page of handwritten account numbers I'd once shared with Harold when we managed our joint finances. The woman at the reception desk wore a smile like armor. How can I help you today? I'd like to request historical activity on a closed joint account, I said. It was with my late husband. Account ended in 2017. She raised an eyebrow at the word late. Let me call someone from account services. That's when we met Ms. Latrice Morgan. She came out in navy slacks, low heels, and a silk blouse with sunflowers stitched along the collar. Maybe late 40s. Sharp but kind eyes. She led us into a glass-walled room, marked Private Client Services. I explained everything. Or, just enough, that I'd been receiving strange digital traces, suggesting activity on an account that should have died with my husband. I handed her the paperwork. Ms. Morgan reviewed the documents carefully. No rush. She tapped her nails lightly against the desk, ticking off something in her mind. After a moment, she stood. Let me see what I can pull up from the archive server. Might take a minute. It took 11. When she returned, she was quiet. She laid a paper in front of me, sliding it across the polished table like a weapon. Withdrawal, February 14th, 2019, $8,000. ATM, Tallahassee, Florida. Card ending in 8,934. My throat went dry. That's the same card linked to the email, Marcus said, voice low. I didn't know whether to scream or sob. Ms. Morgan cleared her throat. That account should have been closed upon death notice. But this record shows it remained quietly active for almost 2 years. Was that legal? I asked. She hesitated. Someone failed to finalize the death notification process. Or someone reversed it. The account was renamed into a holding category. Unusual, but not unheard of, especially if a family member with access interfered. Jerome, I whispered. Marcus leaned back, exhaling hard. He kept it alive. The account and the man. Ms. Morgan gave me a look. Half sympathy, half steel. You'll want to report this. And soon? I nodded, already folding the page into my folder. By the time we left the bank, the lie had a timestamp. February 14th, 2019. Valentine's Day. Harold wasn't dead. He was making withdrawals. And someone, somewhere, was helping him do it. The next day, Marcus followed the man. It wasn't even a plan, not really. We had driven back to River Street, hoping to get another glimpse. Me half hoping it was a mistake. Marcus half praying it wasn't. But there he was again. Same jacket, same gait, same smirk that used to cross his face when he fixed things he'd broken. Marcus pulled the car into a side lot and waited. Harold and the woman, young, sunglasses on her head like a crown, walked along the promenade as if they had nowhere to be. He carried a paper bag with a baguette sticking out. She linked her arm through his like a wife. Not a fling, not a client. Someone permanent. They strolled toward a luxury building, Riverfront Towers condos. I recognized it by the silver dolphin sculpture near the entry. I had passed it years ago during a Savannah trip with the Unity seniors. I remembered thinking, those places probably cost a fortune. They stopped at the glass doors. The woman tapped a code. The door clicked open. Stay in the car, Marcus said. Then he was gone, walking calmly toward the garage entrance like he belonged there. I watched the minutes tick by. 8, 9, 12. I nearly called him when he finally reappeared, climbing into the driver's seat with a look I'd only seen on him once before. The day he identified his father's remains. "You're not gonna believe this," he said. He handed me his phone. On screen was a still frame from his dashcam app. A man, Harold, in the parking garage, leaning over the back of a gray Lexus, peeling something off the bumper. A second frame showed it clearly. He was switching license plates. Deliberate. Quick. Practiced. Marcus hit play. We watched it again. A moment of unguarded crime. Not just hiding. Preparing. Managing an identity. "Condo unit is listed under Craig Holdings, LLC," Marcus added, scrolling through an online business registry. "Set up in 2018. Georgia registration. Managed anonymously." "Craig," I echoed, stomach turning. "My name, Harold's." There was no denying it now. He wasn't hiding from the world. He was reassembling inside it. Piece by piece. Condo. Companion. Company. Car. And as I stared at that paused image, Harold crouched behind a car with a screwdriver in hand, I stopped feeling grief. What I felt was strategy forming in my chest. If he had a plan, so would I. And mine started with a man named Alonzo Carter. That night, I made the call. Jerome answered on the second ring. His voice hadn't changed. Still smooth, still just north of smug. "Renetta," he said, like we were catching up over peach cobbler. "To what do I owe the surprise?" I saw Harold. Silence. Long enough for me to hear my own pulse thudding in my ears. Then, "Come again?" "Don't play dumb," I said, sharper than I meant. "River Street. Tuesday morning. He was with a woman. I have photos, video, and an email. From after he died." A chuckle. "I see. Controlled. Renetta, I think maybe it's time you took a step back from all this. You've been under a lot of stress lately. Retirement can bring on episodes." My mouth went dry. I gripped the phone tighter. "Don't you dare. You're chasing ghosts," he said calmly. "You buried Harold. I handled the arrangements. You signed the death claim paperwork. The insurance came through. You and Marcus got what was owed. Let it go." "What I got," I snapped, "was 7 years of thinking I was a widow, while my husband bought croissants for a girlfriend by the river." A pause. Then he lowered his voice. "Look, sis-in-law, if you keep digging, you won't like what you find. Just go home, leave it alone." And then, click. He hung up. I stared at the screen. The call hadn't even lasted 3 minutes, but it had said everything. Jerome knew. He knew. And more than that, he was involved. He'd played the long game while I mourned, paid, cooked alone. And now, he was threatening to rewrite the narrative. That I was unwell, confused, grasping at shadows. Gaslight. Misdirection. Classic mischief in a silk suit. I opened my voice recorder app. The whole call had been captured. I emailed it to Marcus, Zoe Carter, and myself. Labeled it Jerome Craig. April 7th. Call. Threatening behavior. Marcus came out to the balcony where I sat, phone still in my lap. "He didn't deny it, did he?" he asked. "No," I whispered. "Worse. He wants me to question my own mind." Marcus leaned against the railing, face hard. "That's their angle. Undermine your sanity. Say you're grieving too hard. Seeing things." I looked out over the Savannah rooftops. Let them say it. Because next time I spoke, I'd speak with receipts. And I wouldn't be alone. By morning, I was done doubting. April 8th. Greyhound bus. 7:05 a.m. The air smelled like cold coffee and old gum. Marcus sat beside me, jaw set, his laptop open on his knees, fingers flying. He was copying files, archiving images, organizing a folder he named Operation Resurrection. I didn't speak for the first 40 miles. I just stared out the window. watching moss-draped trees flicker past. My hands were folded around my phone. Not for distraction. For defense. Jerome had texted me overnight. Jerome, 1:13 a.m. You won't like what you find, Renetta. Trust me. Let it be. Let the dead rest. My breath had caught when I read it. The sheer nerve of that man, texting me from the comfort of a lie he helped build. I screenshotted it, sent it straight to Zoe. He called back within the hour. You ready to take this public? Yes, I said, but not just yet. He understood. Alonzo Zoe Carter wasn't just a licensed private investigator. He was a man who understood Southern quiet. Former APD. Moved to private work after what he called institutional fatigue. He'd seen how things got buried, especially when money, family, and pride were tangled together. I'd met him through Pastor Hines, cousin. When I told him the basics, husband declared dead in 2017, spotted alive in 2024, he didn't blink. Just asked for files, dates, and a statement of intent. Not vengeance, I told him. Just truth. Back on the bus, I unzipped my carry-on and pulled out the plastic file folder. I opened it slowly, laying out the pieces like armor. Death certificate, life insurance statement, bank withdrawal in 2019, email from Harold post-death, photo of Harold on River Street, Jerome's call recording, the screenshot of Jerome's threat. I stared at the stack, then slid it all back in and snapped the clasp shut. We reached Atlanta by noon. By 2:15, Zoe and his paralegal, Jeanette, had us in their office, a converted firehouse with exposed brick and the smell of cedar oil. Zoe pulled out a yellow legal pad and wrote one word in block letters: fraud. Underneath it, he wrote, identity deception, misuse of death cert, insurance fraud, financial exploitation, emotional abuse. First stop, he said, we lock down your accounts. Every dollar. Every access point. Then we go after the records. Official ones. Georgia, Florida, state to state. Marcus nodded. I'll help track digital traces. He slipped once. He'll slip again. I looked at both of them, their energy sharp and clear. And for the first time since Savannah, I felt my footing return. I'd been a ghost in my own life long enough. Now it was his turn to haunt. And this time, I wouldn't blink. April 9th, 12 a.m., First Federal Bank, Decatur branch. The lobby was quiet. Just the low hum of fluorescent lights and a woman tapping her acrylic nails at the deposit kiosk. I stood at the counter in my best blazer, folder in hand, ready to reclaim what was mine. Ms. Daria Ellis came out from her glass-walled office wearing smart heels, and the kind of expression you only see on women who've had to fight to be taken seriously. She remembered me. Mrs. Craig, she said, extending a hand. You're here about fraud monitoring? I nodded. And I need a full lock placed on account number 21,438,901. Immediately. We sat down, and I laid out the documentation. Harold's supposed death, the bank withdrawal from 2019, the email, the sighting in Savannah. She didn't blink. You brought receipts, she said, her lips tightening. Good. That makes my job easier. I slid the phone across the table and played the voicemail Jerome had left a year ago, the one where he thanked me for signing over old financial documents I didn't remember authorizing. Daria frowned. That's irregular. Did you have a financial POA on file with him? Never, I said. And I never gave consent for account changes post-2017. She typed something rapid into her terminal, then looked up. There's been one recent login attempt. 3 days ago. Failed password. IP address pinged from Miami. I closed my eyes. They're getting desperate. She activated a freeze on every account tied to Harold's name, even the dormant ones. Then added a fraud alert with all 3 bureaus: Equifax, TransUnion, and Experian. I signed the forms with a pen that shook just slightly in my fingers. We changed the pins. The online access. The security questions. She added voice print protection and a verification password only I would know. "Mrs. Craig," she said, handing me the new paperwork, "you've been far more composed than most people in your situation." "I've had 7 years to practice grief," I replied. "Now I'm practicing something else." Marcus met me in the parking lot, holding a thumb drive with encrypted backups of all our files. "No more looking over your shoulder," he said. "From here on out, they do the explaining." Back home, I opened my dresser drawer. The envelope with Harold's old banking details, the one I hadn't touched in years, was gone. My breath caught. Jerome must have taken it. Or maybe Harold, before his death. But now, it didn't matter. Because from this day forward, every financial door was bolted tight. And I held the only keys. April 11th, DeKalb County Records Office. The air smelled like dust, toner, and faint desperation, the scent of people trying to rewrite paper truths. I sat at window 4, where a young clerk named Mr. Reynolds looked up from his screen and adjusted his tie. His smile flickered when I laid out the request. "I'd like certified copies of both a marriage license and death certificate," I said, "for Harold Benjamin Craig, Georgia and Florida jurisdictions, from 1986 to present." He blinked. "Both?" "Yes." My voice was calm. "And I need confirmation of cremation. Registry of disposition." He typed for a while. Then, longer. His fingers slowed. "Ma'am," he began, carefully, "there's no record of cremation in Georgia. Or Florida. Nothing filed with the Bureau of Vital Statistics." I stared. "But the funeral home, Haven Rest, submitted a certificate of death," he said. "But that's different. The cremation, actual body disposition, should have triggered a separate record. State law requires it." "Could it have been an oversight?" Marcus asked beside me. Reynolds shook his head. "Crematoriums report directly. There's a statewide log. It's missing." My hands tightened around the folder in my lap. "So legally, my husband's body was never declared gone." He nodded. "That's one way to put it." He printed the marriage license. Ink still warm. Then he printed the death certificate I already had. And lastly, he printed a notarized absence of cremation registry. All 3 pages were slid across the glass. "This last one," he said, tapping the notarized sheet. "You'll want to include it if you're pursuing legal action. It means no body was officially reduced or interred, which leaves a gap in chain of custody." "Chain of what?" I asked. "Basically," he said gently, "the body vanished between signature and fire. We left with a manila envelope that weighed more than paper should. It felt like concrete proof of everything I feared. Not only was Harold alive, but someone had built an entire shadow operation out of government ink." Outside, I sat on the hood of the car and stared at the courthouse brick. All those years, I thought I was a widow. I'd been a ghost bride, mourning a man who'd simply vanished through a clerical crack, wide enough to swallow truth whole. Now, I had the receipts, certified, stamped, numbered, and that was the moment I knew. He hadn't just faked his death, he'd faked his disappearance. April 13th, Unity Baptist Church. Pastor Hines' office smelled like lemon polish and worn leather. A humid breeze pushed through the cracked window behind his desk, stirring the edge of an old sermon outline pinned to the corkboard. He looked older than I remembered, a little more stooped, a little less brisk, but when he took my hand in both of his grip was firm as ever. "I knew something was off at that service," he said, gently shaking his head. "I wanted to say something back then, but grief, it clouds all things." I handed him the funeral program and the printed documents, the photo of the urn, the invoice I'd dug up from Haven Rest. Line item, basic cremation minus $1,950, but no matching state record. No confirmation of ashes received. Just a shell of ritual. He read slowly, then folded his hands, brow furrowed. "You're telling me this man, Harold Craig, Never died? I'm telling you, I said. He walked away, and someone helped him do it. He leaned back, thoughtful. Then he opened his desk drawer and pulled out a small black planner from 2017. He flipped through it until he landed on a page marked November. Here, he said, tapping a line. You see this? Renetta. Eulogy notes. We spoke the day before the funeral. You told me Harold didn't want a full service, so I wrote a brief message. But I never saw the body. Jerome handled everything. He looked up. You think Jerome knew? I think Jerome built it. We asked him to write a notarized statement confirming his role in the funeral, and the fact that he was never shown remains. He agreed, quietly but without hesitation. I've officiated 36 funerals, he said as he signed the affidavit. I've never once been denied access to a body, except this one. By afternoon, we were back at Zoe Carter's office. He read through the pastor's affidavit, the cremation absence report, and the death certificate with narrowed eyes. This is turning, he said. Legally, strategically, fast. He pulled out a whiteboard and listed our confirmed allies. Marcus Craig, direct witness and tech support, Pastor Hines, religious authority, funeral officiant Miss Daria Ellis, bank fraud officer, account lockdown, Mr. Reynolds, county clerk, document custodian, Alonzo Zoe Carter, licensed investigator. That night, we signed affidavits. Marcus detailed the Savannah sighting and dashcam video. Pastor Hines notarized everything himself. Jeanette scanned and filed every page into what she called the resurrection docket. And just before Zoe turned out the lights, he added one more note to the whiteboard. Opposition, Jerome Craig claim. Renetta is unwell, hallucinating, grieving too long. Filed motion. Petition to assess mental competency. Pending review. I stared at that last line. They weren't just going to deny me, they were going to try to erase me. But this time, I had more than love and memory on my side. I had documents. I had witnesses. And I had a name they couldn't run from anymore. April 15th. Carter Investigations. Upstairs conference room. Jeanette brewed coffee strong enough to wake the dead. We were already up 3 cups by 9 a.m. Across the table, Zoe laid out the plan with surgical clarity. We file a dual complaint, he said. One with the Georgia Department of Insurance, fraudulent life claim. One with the Attorney General, falsification of public documents. Each one triggers its own investigation. Different lanes. But they both lead to Harold. Or whatever name he's using now, Marcus muttered, flipping through the LLC documents. That was the other thing. Jeanette had run a property search through the state database. The Riverfront Towers condo, the one Marcus saw him enter, had just transferred title, April 14th, 2024, to an anonymous trust. The name? June Sparrow Revocable Trust. I said it out loud, slowly. June Sparrow. That's not a person. That's a cover. Zoe nodded. Some lawyer cooked that up to protect the asset, but we can subpoena the trust manager once we get an investigator assigned. He passed me a folder. Inside, draft language for both complaints. Clear, factual, no emotion, just violations. Fraudulent death certification insurance claim under false pretenses. Concealment of living status. Improper disposition of remains. Financial deception of beneficiary. We're not filing today, Zoe said. Today, we build the map. Tomorrow, we walk it into the offices. Public record. Under oath. If we file first, we control the timeline. I nodded. My voice was steady, but my hands weren't. Marcus reached across the table and touched my wrist. They made this personal. We're making it official. Pastor Hines sat in the corner, watching. Let the truth do its work, he said softly. You don't have to raise your voice when you bring the truth to the door. Before we left, Jeanette added one more line to our master file. Craig Holdings, LLC. Right pointing arrow, June Sparrow Trust. Title transfer. April 14th, 24. That was the nail. They were moving fast, too fast. They knew I was close, but they didn't know I'd found my footing. And now I had a plan with dates, signatures, and 3 copies sealed in tamper-proof envelopes. Come what may, I would not be buried under this lie. Not this time. April 18th. Stateshire Atlanta office, conference room 3B. The room was all glass and gloss, clean lines, cold air, and the low thrum of a vent that wouldn't quit. The table stretched too long, like it was built to hold confrontation. I was early. Ms. Daria Ellis came with me, not in her role as bank fraud officer, but as my support. She said, "Every institution needs a conscience." Today, she sat beside me like a wall. Marcus hovered at the edge of the room, phone recording quietly from his pocket. The meeting had been scheduled for a simple estate review, standard protocol when questions arise around insurance disbursement. But I knew better. I could feel it in my ribs. At 10:07 a.m., the door opened. Jerome walked in like he owned the oxygen. Crisp navy suit, no tie, just arrogance and cologne. He gave me a look that hovered between pity and performance. "Renetta," he said, like we were about to discuss a misplaced casserole dish. He wasn't alone. He had papers in hand, legal-sized, thickly stapled. He placed them on the table with the kind of care reserved for bombs. The lead agent, Mr. Talbert, from Stateshire's audit division, adjusted his glasses. "We're here to review discrepancies related to the 2017 disbursement of policy number 76,489, Harold Benjamin Craig." "Mr. Craig?" He looked at Jerome. "You submitted a petition regarding the mental competency of the beneficiary?" Jerome leaned forward. "Yes. I have grave concerns about my sister-in-law's emotional state. She's made several wild claims about my deceased brother, including suggestions that he's alive." He let the word dangle in the air like smoke. I didn't move. "I've compiled statements from friends and neighbors," he went on, tapping the stack, "all of whom report signs of confusion, emotional fixation, and imagined sightings. It's classic, grief-induced hallucination. Delayed trauma." He smiled. "The kind that wants to be seen as noble. I believe she's unwell. And I worry about her son's influence in this spiral." Ms. Ellis leaned in then. "Mr. Craig," she said coolly, "are you aware that the account associated with Harold's name showed activity in 2019, 2 years after his death?" He flinched. Mr. Talbert looked up. "Is that documented?" I opened my folder, pulled out the statement, the email, the affidavit from Pastor Hines. I placed each one in a neat row across the polished table. "We're here," I said calmly, "because someone used my husband's death to commit fraud, and I won't be painted as unstable to protect a lie." Jerome's mouth opened, then shut. For the first time since this all began, he looked small. The room shifted. Not dramatically, not loud, but I felt the wind change, and I knew, the next time I sat across from him, I wouldn't need to defend my sanity. He'd have to explain his freedom. April 21st. 10:01 a.m. Stateshire Bank lobby, downtown Atlanta. Open-air room, camera-equipped, surrounded by frosted glass and security desks. We'd scheduled an in-person claim review with multiple parties present, insurance, bank, and family. I insisted it be public. I wanted cameras. I wanted witnesses. I wanted truth to be undeniable and seen. Zoe stood beside me. Marcus had the master file. Pastor Hines came in a clean black suit. Ms. Daria Ellis nodded toward the bank guards as we walked in. All of them, each one, had seen enough lies already. Then the doors opened, and Harold walked in, alive, walking like a man who thought he could rewrite the laws of gravity with nothing but nerve. Dyed hair, too dark, too neat, trim beard. He wore a beige blazer and tan slacks, like he wanted to be invisible in the color of paper. The woman from Savannah walked behind him, silent, sunglasses still perched like entitlement. A hush fell. Even the floor seemed to still. Mr. Talbert, The Stateshire agent stood. "Mr. Craig?" His voice cracked, just slightly. "Is that you?" Harold stopped, looked around, saw me, and for a single flicker of a second, his face broke. Then it smoothed over again, smug and cautious. "I go by Henry Sparrow now," he said, voice low. "But yes, I used to be Harold Craig." Ms. Ellis stepped forward. "Then I assume you're aware your life insurance claim was paid in full under the name Harold Craig?" "I never filed anything," he said smoothly. "My brother handled that. I had no part in it. He spread his hands. "I was in witness protection." The room blinked. No one believed it. Zoe, calm as steel, pulled out a DNA test kit. Sealed, chain of custody form attached. "We'll verify that now." "I don't consent to this circus," Harold snapped. "But you consented to the payout," Marcus said, stepping forward. "You signed for the trust. You cashed the money." Pastor Hines cleared his throat. "And you let your wife bury an empty urn." Silence. Choking. All the pretense peeled back. Mr. Talbert motioned to the bank security. "He needs to stay. This is now a confirmed case of fraudulent claim filing. DNA will verify identity, but we have more than enough documentation to trigger forfeiture under Clause 9B of the policy." He read it aloud. "If any part of a claim is determined to be fraudulent, all rights to benefit shall be revoked." Harold looked at Jerome, who had slipped in behind him like smoke. They exchanged a glance, panic wrapped in pride. I stood, straightened my jacket. "I don't want revenge," I said quietly. "I want the truth made legal. And irreversible." Mr. Talbert nodded. "It's begun." And as the bank's cameras rolled, as the weight of years pressed down and finally lifted, I watched the man I mourned become the man who would finally answer. Under the eyes of every soul he'd tried to erase. 5 minutes later, we laid out the receipts. Zoe placed a black binder on the table with a gravity that stilled the air. Each tab was labeled, color-coded, time-stamped. He began calmly, like a teacher unrolling a final exam. "Exhibit A," he said, sliding out a still from Marcus's dash cam. Harold crouched behind the Lexus, changing license plates. Gasps whispered through the room. "Exhibit B," he continued, "bank withdrawal receipt from February 14, 2019, 2 years after the date of death." He passed the document to Mr. Talbert, who examined it like a relic. "Exhibit C," Jeanette added, handing over the screenshot of the auto payment email. Metadata showed IP trace from Tallahassee, signed in under the name Harold Craig. "Exhibit D," Marcus said, cueing the audio. Jerome's voice, recorded during our April 7th call, played over the speaker. "You won't like what you find, Renetta. Let the dead rest." And then, the final blow. Pastor Hines stepped forward with a soft shuffle, his hand steady despite the emotion in his voice. He handed over his notarized affidavit. "I officiated the funeral, but I was never shown a body. That's the truth." Mr. Talbert turned to the binder's last section, photocopies of the cremation invoice, the notarized absence of cremation records, and a scanned image of the original death certificate. Then he looked at Harold. "You were declared dead. Your death triggered a payout of $310,000. That payout was cashed. Beneficiaries designated. And yet, here you are, alive, operating under a new name, under a holding company tied to a property transferred into the June Sparrow Revocable Trust less than a week ago." Harold's mouth opened, closed. His hands twitched. Jerome stepped back like the air had shifted against him. Mr. Talbert's voice stayed flat, but it hit like thunder. "Stateshire is initiating a full clawback under Clause 9B of your policy. That includes interest and civil penalties," Zoe added. "And our case file is already in the hands of the Georgia Insurance Fraud Bureau." Bank security stepped forward, flanking Harold without touching him. One officer gently collected the binder as evidence. "I suggest neither of you leave the state," the lead officer said. Jerome tried to say something then, some scrambled protest, but it fell apart in his throat. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. because everything I'd carried, every doubt, every lie, every lonely night with that empty urn, was now in the open, labeled, verified, witnessed. And as Harold tried to look anywhere but at me, I finally met his eyes, and I did not blink. April 28th, 2:40 p.m., Carter and Associates Law, Decatur. The sky outside was low and bright, clouds moving fast like they were eager to clear the past. I sat at the head of a long walnut table, pen in hand, a folder before me stamped R.C. Craig, Legacy Trust. The air smelled like warm paper and lemon oil. Jeanette stood by the door. Zoe sat across from me, expression steady. "This," he said, tapping the top sheet, "finalizes the transfer of all assets, bank funds, real property, and residual claims into a new irrevocable trust in your name alone. No successor without your notarized consent. No challenge allowed unless filed within federal fraud protection standards." I signed. Each page, each signature line, each field that once belonged to Harold's future and now belonged to mine. Marcus was there too. He didn't say much. He didn't have to. His hand on my shoulder as I signed was louder than anything. Statesure had initiated full recovery procedures. The $310,000 was frozen immediately. By the time compound interest and penalties were applied, it reached $368,400. Zoe made sure it landed where it should. In my name, protected, untouchable, a line item secured for life. Not revenge money, not blood money, just restoration. Jerome and Harold, or Henry Sparrow, as he still tried to sign documents, were under active federal investigation. Forgery, fraud, identity deception, misuse of legal death certification. They would face real courts now. Real terms. Real light. As I gathered my copies into a new navy binder, Zoe handed me something small and metal. A key. Brass. Slightly worn. Cool in my palm. "The condo," he said. "It's yours now. The title's clean. The trust relinquished it when the fraud ruling came down. You'll need to change the locks." I looked at the key, then up at him. "I'll change more than that." That evening, I walked up to the mailbox at 4212 Glenview Avenue, my home for 30 years, and slid in a placard. New engraving. Clean lettering. R.C. Craig Legacy Trust. Esther, 2024. I stood there a long while, watching the late sun stretch golden across the lawn Harold once trimmed. The porch I once waited on. The door I once mourned behind. He had tried to disappear. He had tried to make me disappear, but I was still here. And now, my name was on every page, every deed, every door, every cent. He faked his death, but I reclaimed my life, not through anger, through paper, and through the undeniable, enduring, documented truth.